You awoke with heavy breath and a scratchy throat. The hot, dry air of the stone cavern crushing your lungs. The rough floor, a blend of sand and sharp rock fragments, stretched endlessly beneath your bare, cracked feet. Around you, the constant murmur of other prisoners echoed in the shadows, while the unceasing clatter of shovels and pickaxes striking metal resounded relentlessly. The dull glint of gold, dreamed of but nearly unreachable, flickered on the damp walls and in pools of mud that clung to your skin. You knew that today, like every day, you would face the stern gaze of the overseer, sweat streaming down your body, and the perilous ground beneath, threatened by collapses and the silent ambush of scorpions. The desert heat was not only outside, it burned your weary muscles as you began, once more, the crushing routine of breaking stones. In desperate pursuit of the metal that might cost your life, and in the suffocating silence of the mine, you wondered how many had endured before you in this grim, golden sentence. The mine's heavy air wrapped around you like a relentless shroud, thick with the scent of dust and iron. Flickers of pale blue from the dim entrance barely pierced the gloom, barely enough light to reveal the jagged contours of the cavern walls. Your skin prickled as the faint echoes of distant labor wove with the low breath of your fellow slaves, a collective rhythm of exhaustion and fear. Your throat, parched and coarse, swallowed the gritty taste that clung to the stale air. Each step you took was measured, the uneven ground demanding your full attention, rough sand grinding between your toes, scraping your every movement. Outside, the desert sun hammered relentlessly. But inside the mine, a different kind of heat pressed on your back. The temperature clung heavily, suffocating in its silent intensity. Your hands, calloused and raw, gripped the pickaxe's worn handle, the wood rough against your aching palms. The cool metal head was your only tool in this endless battle with stone and time. If today's modern exhaustion hits when your phone dies, consider your own despair when the last flicker of hope dies in the dark. No final comfort nor release, just the relentless march of hours spent in this underground prison where time itself seems to stand still. You joined the slow procession deeper into the mine, the dim torchlight casting flickering shadows that danced across the damp rock faces. The sound of metal striking stone echoed endlessly, a monotonous percussion that seemed to beat in time with your heartbeat. Faces blurred in. The dim light, sweat-streaked and hollow-eyed, as you reached your spot against a jagged wall, the faint warmth of a small, shared fire touched your cold limbs, a brief comfort amidst the cold dread. Your lungs ached as the heavy air filled them again. You raised your pickaxe and struck, the vibrations shooting through your arms, one swing, then another, each movement deliberate and slow, muscles trembling under the strain. Your mind clung to the small flame's glow, the communal heat, both a shield and a fragile reminder of the life beyond these suffocating walls. Then silence fell abruptly. The usual low clatter ceased, swallowed by a sudden hush. Even the restless shifting of bodies stilled. You felt the change before you saw it. A shared glance passed unnoticed among the enslaved. The overseer was not his usual stern self. Something had shifted in the air, a silent tension that wrapped tighter than any chain. And as cold dread seeped deeper into your bones, you sensed that today would not be like the others. A moment poised on the edge of something vast and undefined, stretched before you in the mind's oppressive darkness. Hey, before Morpheus takes you completely, quickly check if you're still subscribed. For some, the button disappeared, and I don't want you to miss the next sleepy stories. Take a soft like, gentle as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little calm corner alive. Thanks for being part of it. You held your breath, the sudden silence pressing against your eardrums like a stone slab. The clatter of metal against rock had ceased, swallowed whole by the cavern's cold, shrouding stillness. The flickering torches along the walls hissed softly, their flames trembling in the stale air as if unsure whether to survive this moment. You sensed more than saw the shift around you, the hesitant movements of others, the swallowed coughs, the faint scrape of shifting feet. The overseer's gaze, usually sharp and unyielding, was replaced by an unspoken command, heavier than any spoken word. The air thickened, each breath slicing into your throat like dry sandpaper. Your body instinctively froze, the pickaxe hanging loosely in your tired hands, the wooden handle rough and unforgiving beneath your calloused palms. The dust, once drifting lazily in the shafts of torchlight, now hung motionless, as if time itself had been paused in a cruel game. The heat from the fire was a distant memory, replaced by a cold tension that snaked beneath your skin, curling around. Your heart with icy fingers, you felt the weight of eyes on you, not the hollow, exhausted gazes of your fellow prisoners, but something sharper, colder. The overseer was approaching, quieter than usual, yet his presence filled the space like a slow, creeping shadow. Step by slow step, you moved deeper into the gloom. The jagged rock walls seemed to close in, the rough surfaces cold and damp against your bare feet as you shuffled forward with measured caution. With every small sound, a stone shifting, your own breath, you fought the urge to flinch, to betray the barely contained fear that pooled in your stomach. The silence was a promise of change, the kind that digs beneath your skin before it shows itself in the world. And through it all, the muffled murmurs of your fellow prisoners lingered behind you, a chorus of weariness, threaded with unspoken dread. You paused beside a cluster of stones jutting from the floor, the rough edges scraping against your cracked foot. The texture ground slowly beneath your skin, coarse and unyielding, anchoring you to this unforgiving place. You ran a hand along the cool rock wall, feeling the uneven surface, cool moisture beating faintly at your fingertips. The damp smell of earth, mixed with the acrid tang of metal, filled your nostrils, grounding you even as your mind raced with uneasy thoughts. The familiar rhythm of your breathing, shallow, ragged, clung to your chest. You adjusted your grip on the pickaxe, its cold metal head resting heavily against the stone, weighted like your thoughts. Then, a whispered scraping interrupted the silence, faint at first, an almost imperceptible scuff. Your heart stuttered. Somewhere in the dark recesses of the cavern, a shadow slid, a silent promise of something watching, waiting. The collective tension rippled through the prisoners, subtle but undeniable. Your skin prickled, 1,000 tiny alarms flickering along your arms, down your spine. It was not the usual unease from the mine's dangers, falling rock, hidden scorpions, but something quieter, more insidious. The kind of fear that seeps from beneath the surface, twisting the air into thick ropes of suspense. You took a slow step forward, muscles taut, every breath deliberate. The flickering torchlight cast long, trembling shadows, painting eerie shapes that danced just beyond your sight. Your fingers trembled slightly, not from exhaustion alone, but from the heavy weight of uncertainty that settled deep inside you. The rough wooden handle seemed to pulse beneath your palm. Steady movement, each small sound became a whispered negotiation between survival and despair. As you moved, the hint of a distant chime echoed faintly, a soft clinking sound like metal against metal, out of place in the stone silence. It drew your attention, pulling your senses outward beyond the narrow edges of the tunnel. Your mind grasped at the faint hope buried within the noise, a fragile thread of meaning in the endless dark. You realized you had strayed from the others, the murmurs and shuffles fading behind you as you followed the subtle, reluctant trail of this new sound. Ahead, the cavern opened into a wider space, a hollow breathing in the bowels of the mine. The damp earth beneath your feet grew softer, colder, and your skin prickled with the faintest brush of moisture in the air. A single, weak beam of light filtered through a crack overhead, falling like a slender blade into the gloom. Dust motes floated silently in the shaft, suspended in a quiet dance impossible to escape. The scent of wet stone mingled with the sharper odor of sweat and soil, saturating the space with a strange solidity. You crouched by a pile of jagged rocks, feeling the uneven, gritty surface press into your palms, grounding you to the uncertain floor. Your chest tightened with every inhale, the stale air thick with tension and unshed fears. The silence, now heavier still, pressed all around like an unseen weight. Somewhere beyond the shadows, the faint scrape of movement suggested you were not alone here. The flicker of nerves quickened, but your hands steadied on the pickaxe's worn handle, grounding you in the cold reality of this moment. As the distant echoes of the subterranean world slipped away, you noticed the thin glint of something half buried beneath the rubble. A shard of metal, dull and rusted, catching the faint light like a silent signal. You reached out slowly, fingers brushing the cold surface, the texture gritty and uneven beneath your calloused skin. The faintest trace of a mark traced the curve, a symbol carved so faintly you could barely discern its meaning. Your pulse thrummed, a deep and steady drum beneath the brittle quiet. You pulled back, heart hammering with a mixture of dread and strange hope. There was a promise in that small piece, a whisper of something hidden deep in this wretched place, waiting to be unearthed, waiting to be understood. And as the shadows lengthened and the torchlight wavered, you realized that the day's labor had folded into something far older, far darker. Something was stirring beneath the stone, and you were no longer just a prisoner of the mine. You were on the cusp of something far greater, pulled slowly into the hollow breath of the unknown. You lingered in the shadowed hollow, the shard of rusted metal still warm beneath your fingertips, as if it held the faint pulse of something long buried. The cavern breathed around you in slow, heavy waves, the damp air settling like a cloak over your skin, prickling every nerve and leaving a residue of cold against your sweat-slicked forehead. You pressed your palm against the rough stone, the grains sharp and uneven, grounding you with their merciless tangibility, as your eyes traced the faint symbol carved into the fragment. It was ancient, worn by time and corrosion, almost swallowed by the earth itself. The faint echoes of the mine's endless work had faded to a distant murmur, replaced by a thick silence that wrapped tighter with every passing second. Your breath was shallow, caught in the tight web of nervous tension that crept beneath your ribs and pooled in your stomach like a stagnant pool. The flickering torchlight, weakened and uncertain, cast shadows that trembled like restless spirits across the walls. Dust hung in the air, heavy and motionless, settling slowly on your skin like invisible ash. Slowly you rose, the stubborn ache in your joints reminding you of the day's relentless toils. Each movement was deliberate and careful, your bare feet adjusting to the stony floor with a cautious rhythm, toes curling against the rough pebbles hiding beneath the surface. The shard you had found was a silent challenge, drawing you further from the others, deeper into the mine's labyrinth of secrets and silent threats. A chill traced along your spine, the cold breath of the underground mingling with the dry heat clenched tight in your chest. The sound came again, softer this time, almost a whisper, the faint scratch of metal against rock. It teased the edges of your hearing, just out of clear focus. You turned slowly, muscles coiled and senses sharpened, but saw nothing beyond the dull glow of the torchlight. The cavern walls stretched infinitely in both directions, jagged silhouettes folding into darkness. The scent of wet stone and dry earth twisted like smoke around you, while the distant hum of labor flickered faintly, a fragile tether to the world you knew. Your hand tightened around the pickaxe handle, rough wood worn smooth by countless grips, now trembling under quiet fear. Your skin, slick with sweat and dirt, clung to the tool as if it were the only solid truth in this murky domain. The sharp edges of the metal shard burned like a silent summons in your memory, a question without an answer, a beginning with no clear path. You stepped forward, every footfall muffled by the uneven stones and the weight of your thoughts. The cavern opened wider ahead, a vast hollow where stale air floated still and thick. Moisture beaded on the walls, forming slow rivulets that meandered through the cracks. You could taste the dampness on your tongue, bitter and cold, a sharp contrast to the desert dryness you had left behind. A faint glimmer caught your eye near a pool of murky water, clinging to the floor, something bright, almost iridescent, winking weakly in the gloom. Your breath hitched as you closed the distance, the wetness of the cave floor seeping into your soles, chilling your spirit a fraction more. You crouched low, the chill pressing against your bare knees as you reached toward the gleam. Fingers brushed the surface of a small, oddly shaped stone, cool and smooth, contrasting with the coarse rubble all around. It was unlike anything else you had seen, its edges worn by time, but the surface etched with strange, looping patterns, faintly pulsating with an unspoken energy. For a moment, all the noise of the mine, the shouts, the incessant clatter, dropped away, leaving only your racing pulse and the heavy thrum of something alive beneath the stone. Your chest tightened, breath catching in a fragile rhythm. The quiet spark of strange hope hummed faintly beneath your nerves, bracing you against the cold shadow of dread that still clung to your thoughts. Around you, the distant, hollow rasp of imprisoned breaths whispered softly, a fragile reminder of the life and death dance you were caught within. You felt the weight of an unseen eye resting somewhere just beyond reach, watching, waiting, patient and implacable. As you rose, the torchlight flickered violently, casting the cavern into a chaos of writhing shadows that clawed at the edges of your vision. You stumbled back, your bare feet scraping harshly against jagged stone, toes curling instinctively. The sound that had led you here, a faint clink, like metal brushing against stone, returned suddenly, clearer now, echoing from somewhere deeper within the vast hollow. Your heart pounded in slow, heavy beats, each one ringing out like a bell in the darkness. A breeze, cold and sudden, swept through the passage, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and something else, a trace of iron mixed with bitter herbs, like the scent of distant fire. The air swirled, stirring. Loose dust and sending a shiver down your spine. The mine, once just a prison and a place of labor, had become a cavern of whispered promises and unseen dangers. The line between survival and surrender blurred with every reluctant step. You hesitated at the edge of the hollow, the heavy silence pressing close, holding you in a fragile, trembling balance. The sharp metal shard burned cold in your pocket, a secret too heavy to ignore. Somewhere in the flickering dark, a new sound stirred, subtle and deliberate, a soft scraping that was no longer accidental. It beckoned you onward, into the depths where the mine held its darkest truths. And as your eyes adjusted to the gloom, you dared to step forward, toward the slow, relentless pull of the unknown, where the shadows waited silently to reveal what had always been hidden beneath the stone. You pressed the shard of rusted metal against your palm again, feeling the tiny grooves under your fingertips. As the torchlight dimmed, flickering like a hesitant heartbeat, the cavern's silence stretched out, thick and heavy, pressing against your skin as if the rock itself was holding its breath, waiting. Every breath you took was shallow, the stale air scratching your throat, a dry rasp that echoed the long hours you'd spent underground. The weight of the shard and the silence wrapped around you like twin shackles, pulling you deeper into the mine's cold embrace. You shifted your bare feet carefully, toes curling against the uneven floor. Dust and grit clung stubbornly between them, grinding softly as you moved, while the faint dampness seeped through the cracks in the stone. Around you, the hollow dark stretched endlessly, suffocating and infinite. The faint glow from the cracked ceiling above had grown weaker, a pale sickle of light, barely enough to trace the jagged edges of the cavern walls. The air was thick with the smell of wet stone and something else, a faint iron tang mixed with the distant scent of burned wood, an echo from the world above, or maybe something stirring in the depths. Your fingers tightened around the pickaxe handle, the worn wood rough beneath your palm, its cold metal head steady against the chill spreading through your arms. The sound of your breath, shallow and uneven, was the loudest noise in the stillness. Every small shift set tiny echoes ringing through the hollow, rocks tinkling faintly as you adjusted your footing, the scrape of dust settling, the slow, uneasy sigh of the cavern walls, as if the mine itself was alive, watching. Ahead, a subtle movement flickered in the corner. Of your vision, a shadow curling from the deeper darkness. Your heart slowed its frantic pace momentarily, pulse settling into a slower rhythm, even as the faint scrape of something dragging against stone hummed from far below. The sound was cautious, deliberate, like a whisper made audible just at the edge of hearing. You held your breath, every muscle tight, senses stretched thin. The faint chime of metal brushing against metal repeated softly, a secret signal in the oppressive quiet. You stepped forward, each footfall careful, measured. The ground beneath your feet was cooler here, moist and uneven. Stones slick with moisture that clung to your skin like unseen hands. The draft carried the bitter scent of herbs, dry, aromatic, and slightly burned. A reminder of fires long since extinguished, or perhaps rituals half forgotten in this place. The flickering light played upon the walls, casting half-formed shapes, grotesque and shifting, like spirits lingering just beyond sight. Your skin prickled with a mixture of dread and something stranger, curiosity. The shard had opened a door, a breach in the relentless monotony of your days. You knelt beside a shallow pool of murky water, the surface broken by a slow, falling drip, each drop sending ripples outward, fading into stillness. The reflection waved faintly, distorted and fragmented by the flickering flame held in your other hand. The light dancing endlessly on the sluggish water. Movement, tiny, quick, caught your eye again. You turned slowly, every sense alert to the subtle shift in the cavern's breath. The shadows near the pool lengthened and contracted, a slow dance in the gloom. The clink of metal, sharp and soft at once, rose and fell like distant warning bells. You scanned the darkness, searching, heart steady but pounding with anticipation and the cold squeeze of fear. Slowly you reached toward the edge of the water, where, half buried beneath the mud, a shape caught the thin light. It was another fragment, smaller, smoother. Beside it, faint scratches marred the surface of the stone floor. You traced them carefully with a finger. Lines intersected in a pattern that was both foreign and strangely familiar. An ancient language, whispered long ago and forgotten by time. The lines carried the dust and dampness of ages, yet beneath the grime they shimmered faintly. A sign left deliberately, a message or a warning carved in stone. Your breath caught as the torch flickered wildly, shadows exploding across the walls in frantic waves. A sudden draft pressed against your skin, cold and sharp, sending goosebumps racing down your arms. You pulled back, muscles tense, eyes wide in the uncertain dark. The mind's silence fractured, whispers of movement farther in, barely perceptible but unmistakable. The faint chime of metal sounded again, nearer this time, sharper and more urgent. Your heart thrummed in slow, measured beats as you stood, the shard still warm nestled in your palm, its weight reminding you of unspoken truths buried deep in the earth. With cautious steps, you moved toward the narrowing tunnel beyond the hollow, drawn deeper by the sound that sang like a siren in the dark. Behind you, the murmur of prisoners' breaths, once a constant undercurrent, had faded into a fragile hush. The heavy air clung to your skin, pressed with cold insistence, and every careful movement you made stirred loose dust that floated like forgotten memories in the torchlight. Your bare feet scraped stones rough as nails, every step a silent negotiation with the unstable earth beneath. A slender beam of moonlight, or perhaps something more elusive, slipped through a narrow crack far above, casting a pale glow that seemed to breathe with life. It painted the rugged stones in soft shades of gray, stretching shadows long and thin, like fingers reaching for something beyond sight. The air tasted faintly of iron and something sweet, barely there and gone before you could name it. You paused at the threshold of the tunnel, the chill curling deep in your chest. The shard's cold pulse echoed, a whisper of the unknown, stirring in these forsaken bowels of earth. The metal chime faded into silence once again, leaving only the oppressive stillness that pressed on your skin, heavy and infinite. And then, from the depths ahead, a breath, slow, deliberate, and impossibly close, brushed against you. You stood at the edge of the widening hollow, the shard's faint pulse resting heavy in your palm. Cold and unyielding, it tugged your senses taut, pulling you closer into the cavern's silent secrets. The damp air clung to your bare skin, a thin layer of clammy moisture settling along your neck and shoulders. Your breath, shallow and uneven, filled the space between the distant echoes of dropped stones and whispered shifts unseen. Somewhere in the darkness farther on, the faint scrape of metal against stone whispered again, soft, deliberate, as if the mine itself breathed in cautious anticipation. Your footsteps pressed carefully into the uneven earth, each movement measured to avoid the scattered rubble that threatened to betray you with a sharp clatter. The rough stone floor pressed cold against the pads of your bare feet, loose dust sifting between your toes with every hesitant step. Above, the faint glow from the crack permitted a fragile beam of moonlight, as if the cavern exhaled a silver thread just for you. A narrow shaft of muted light stretching thin across the wet walls. Shadows twisted and folded along the rocky surfaces, movements subtle and fluid, as if the stones themselves were whispering secrets you dared not interrupt. You found yourself drawn deeper into the hollow's heart, the stale air thick with the tang of earth, and something faintly burned, a scent that lingered slightly metallic beneath the heavier musk of damp stone. Your skin prickled under the weight of it, muscles tense, hands clenched tightly around the familiar, rough wood handle of your pickaxe. Its worn head, cold against your palm, was the only anchor in this sea of uncertain shadows. The shard felt impossibly heavy, a silent weight of meaning unknown. Careful not to disturb the fragile stillness, you knelt beside a shallow pool of stagnant water pooling quietly in the cavity's uneven floor. Its surface shimmered faintly, catching the wavering flame from your torch, casting fractured glimmers across the cavern like a slow pulse. As you brushed your fingertips against the water's cool edge, the ripples stretched outward in circles, faint and fragile, momentary blurs of movement, folded back into silence. Your heart beat steady but loud, each thump a reminder of the fragile balance between fear and curiosity pressing down on your shoulders. A faint, sharp click echoed then, closer, more insistent. Your head snapped toward the narrowing passage ahead, the dim light barely coaxing shapes from shadow. The sound repeated, like a whispered call threading through the heavy air. Metal brushing stone, a secret message carved with care. Your hands, still trembling, loosened their grip momentarily, the shard's cold grooves, catching the tiny flickers of light. You swallowed the dry rasp climbing your throat and rose slowly, every joint aching from hours spent in toil. Your body taut with a quiet vigilance. The passage ahead narrowed, funneling the stale air into a constricted breath that you seemed to draw deeper into your lungs. The faint glow of your torch flickered, casting fractured light onto the rough walls, revealing scratches and faint impressions, ancient engravings almost erased by time, yet visible in the dim. You traced your gaze over their faded curves, the stone worn smooth here, telling a story whispered long before you had come. Your bare feet shuffled across the cold floor as you stepped forward, the sensation rough and uneven, grounding you in this alien world. The scent grew sharper, that acrid hint of smoke curling faintly with the earthy musk, a scent both foreign and primal. Inhaling slowly, you tasted the dry bitterness mingling with the moist chill, a scent that pressed against your senses like an old warning. A sudden breeze stirred, thin and cold, cascading through the tunnel with soft murmurs. Dust loosened from the ceiling, falling like fine ash to sift through the air and settle lightly on your skin. You closed your eyes for a moment, feeling the breath brush cold across your cheek, carrying with it a whispered rustle from deeper below, the faintest scrape of movement, barely audible but alive. Your senses reached toward the sound, muscles coiled, heartbeat steady but ready. Ahead, the passage opened slightly into a narrow chamber. The walls here oozed moisture, slow trails of water dripping down in silent procession. You noticed faint traces of footprints in the soft earth, disturbingly recent, the imprint of careful, deliberate steps that led deeper into the darkness. Your fingers brushed the wet stone as you moved forward, the slick texture cool and unyielding beneath your touch. The shard burned faintly against your thigh through the worn fabric of your trousers, a cold reminder of the unknown weight cloaked in iron and rust. The metal sound echoed again, clearer now, a soft clinking like distant bells tangled in the cold. It beckoned silently, a thread pulling you ever onward into the depths where light faltered and shadow thickened. The flicker of your torch cast dancing patterns along the jagged walls, shadows twisting and recoiling, like living things breathing in the dark. You hesitated beside a pile of ancient debris, broken stones, shards of clay pots, fragments of bone that rested subtly beneath the layers of dust. The remnants spoke of lives lived and lost, quiet echoes of stories forgotten beneath the cold weight of the earth. Your skin prickled with a quiet reverence mingled with unease. The shards' whispered pulse thrummed in rhythm with your breathing, a silent heartbeat guiding your next move. One careful step past the debris, and your foot caught a faint resistance. A hidden groove carved into the stone floor, almost imperceptible under the dust. Tracing it with your toe, your pulse quickened. The line curved sharply, disappearing into a fissure between the rocks. Something hid here, something waiting. A sudden flicker of movement caught your eye at the far edge of the chamber. A shadow peeling away from the wall, thin and deliberate. Your breath caught, nerve endings alight with electric tension. But the quiet scraping sound that had haunted you softened to near silence. The darkness closed its grip once more, the silence, pressing in like a final breath. You took a deep breath, the cool air filling your lungs with sharp clarity, and stepped forward into the stillness where the mind held its oldest secrets, and the first whisper of something waiting, just beyond reach, beckoned you deeper into the dark abyss. You stood at the edge of the narrowing passage, the weight of the rusted shard burning lightly in your palm, a cold pulse beneath your skin that seemed to echo the quiet heartbeat of the cavern itself. The narrow tunnel ahead was swallowed in deeper darkness, its walls slick with the lingering moisture that trickled in slow, rhythmic drops, each sound stretching out into the hollow like a whispered promise. Your bare feet shifted carefully against the uneven stone floor, slipping on scattered grains of damp sand and broken fragments of rock. The chill seeped through the thin soles, sending a shiver that snaked along your spine. The stale air pressed heavily against your lungs, thick with the scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic, an odor that clung stubbornly to the back of your throat. You swallowed slowly, tasting the dryness that scraped the inside of your cheeks and settled like ashes. The flickering flame of your torch cast weak shadows that danced irregularly along the jagged walls, the light struggling to pierce the cavern's relentless gloom. Shapes twisted and folded, silent spectators, unreachable in their stoic stillness. The rough texture beneath your fingers as you brushed against the stone was cold and damp, cool drops clinging to the uneven surface like resilience painted in glistening beads. A sudden scrape echoed from deeper within, sharp and distinct in the quiet. You froze, senses taut like strings, stretched to breaking. The sound repeated, a soft, deliberate grinding of metal against stone. Your heart slowed, nerves coiled tight around the sound, like vines. The weight of the shard seemed to grow heavier, as if pulled by unseen hands, urging you forward into the unknown. Each careful step forward was measured and silent, the uneven floor a constant challenge to your balance. You fought to steady your breath, the shallow in and out sounding too loud in the cavern's fixed stillness. A faint whisper of movement brushed past the edges of your vision, too quick to discern, fading like a secret kept just out of reach. Your muscles tensed, and your bare toes curled instinctively against cold stone, scrabbling for purchase. The passage began to widen gradually, the air growing cooler, heavier with the scent of damp stone, and a haunting perfume of something burned long ago. Smoke, curling faintly through the stagnant atmosphere, a ghost of fire now extinguished. Your skin prickled with the unexpected mixture of dread and raw curiosity, the shard's dull glow seeming to pulse softly in rhythm with your heartbeat beneath your trembling fingers. Ahead, the floor gave way to a shallow pool of murky water, its surface still except for the slow fall of a single drip that stretched into delicate ripples, fading silently. You crouched beside the pool, the cold pressing into your knees, every movement deliberate in the heavy silence. Your palms skimmed the water, the chill climbing into your veins, sharp and biting, a fleeting touch of life in this barren place. The torchlight trembled as you leaned closer, revealing the faint shapes beneath the water, sediment scattered over what looked like ancient carvings cut deep into the stone floor. Their edges were softened by time, yet you could make out patterns, looping lines that curled and crossed in unfamiliar formations, whispering stories lost beneath centuries of dust and darkness. A faint jingle of metal sounded again, sharper now, echoing softly from a shadowed corner, coaxing you to look beyond the pool's edge. Your eyes traced the cavern walls, catching movement where nothing should be. A flicker, a half-glimpse of a shadow, sliding just out of clear view. The air carried a tentative breath, heavy with unspoken warning, wrapping you in an invisible grip of suspense. You rose slowly, muscles aching with exhaustion and tension alike. The shard clasped tightly in your hand as the flickering torchlight cast long, trembling lines across the rock face. The cavern seemed to pulse around you, alive with secrets held just beneath the surface. The weight of silence thickening like fog. Breathing carefully, you stepped past the pool, your feet stirring up fine dust that floated momentarily, then settled like forgotten traces. The tunnel narrowed once more, pressing inward with cold stone on either side. The walls slick with moisture, beating and tracing slow, glistening lines. A subtle draft whispered through the enclosure, teasing the fragile flame, coaxing tendrils of smoke to rise and vanish into the darkness. The faint scent of dry herbs lingered, a dry bitterness mingling with the damp chill, weaving a strange, almost sacred thread through the air. Your fingertips brushed the cool stone with hesitant reverence as you reached a small alcove, half concealed by broken rocks and tangled roots curling through cracks. The faint glimmer of metal caught your eye beside a narrow fissure. Another fragment, smaller, smooth and worn, catching light with an almost imperceptible shimmer. Its surface bore delicate marks, faded, scratches that hinted at symbols deliberately carved with care long ago. You paused, breath shallow, heart steady but insistent, feeling the weight of the shard suddenly merge with the sharp clarity of this moment. A silent call, ancient and inscrutable, beckoning you deeper. Before you could react, a sound shifted just behind. A near imperceptible scraping, soft and calculated, like a finger tracing stone. You whipped your head around, pulse hammering, yet all you saw was the quivering torchlight wrestling with the darkness. Steeling yourself, you stepped into the narrowing crack between stones, the tunnel funneling into a thin throat of stone, barely wide enough for your body. The temperature dropped noticeably, with the cold seeping deeper, settling in your bones like an old ache. Moisture kissed your skin, delicate and sharp, a contrast to the desert heat that felt like a distant memory. You moved carefully here, the shard a quiet weight in your pocket, a tether to something real amid swirling shadows. The silence pressed in, thick and unyielding, broken only by the softest sound, now unmistakably close. The gentle, slow scrape of metal caressing stone, a sound patient, waiting, coaxing you forward without haste. And as you rounded the last jagged bend, your breath caught upon seeing a faint glow shimmering in the dark, dim and steady, like a small beacon pulsing with a life of its own. The cavern ahead breathed around the light, ancient walls alive with whispered promises. You stepped closer, unaware that the flickering flame behind you suddenly wavered. And then silence fell again, profound and complete, as if the very breath of the earth had paused to watch. You stepped into the narrowing passage, each footfall cautious against the slick stone floor, where beads of dampness traced fragile rivers along the rough walls. Your bare feet felt every chill, the cold seeping slowly upward, curling through your bones like the soft brush of icy fingers. The heavy air pressed against your chest, thick with the muted scent of wet earth and faded smoke, a lingering reminder of fires long extinguished. The shard you carried weighed heavy in your palm, as much a burden as a beacon, its rusted surface offering no warmth, only the subtle pulse of quiet urgency beneath your calloused skin. Ahead, the darkness deepened, wrapping around you like a shroud. The faint scrape of metal meeting stone whispered again, soft and deliberate, a sound so fragile it might have been imagined. You held your breath, the stale air rasping through your throat like sandpaper, each inhalation sharp and dry. Your grip tightened on the pickaxe, the worn wood rough and steady against your trembling fingers, an anchor amid the shadows, twisting like phantom shapes at the edges of your vision. A thread of pale light stretched from a crack overhead, thin and trembling, casting long, fragile streaks across the floor. Dust hung suspended, motionless as a ghostly veil, settling slowly on your skin and clothes. Your feet shifted, toes curling to steady balance on the uneven stones. Sharp fragments pressing insistently, reminding you of where you were, a breath away from safety or fate. The tunnel seemed on the brink of breathing itself, a slow pulse through the very rock. Slow steps led you forward, each movement deliberate, sounding soft against the stones, as if afraid to disturb some earthen secret. The faintest scent of bitter herbs wove through the stagnant air, dry, acrid, and haunting, curling like smoke around. The chill that prickled your skin, your muscles tensed with silent anticipation. Somewhere beyond the reach of your flickering torchlight, something waited, patient and patiently watching. You reached a narrow alcove where the walls closed in, slick and cool beneath your fingertips. Moisture wet slowly from cracks, dark rivulets tracing ancient paths carved by time long forgotten. The air here tasted of cold stone and distant rain, an impossible sweetness in an underground grave. Your eyes caught the glint of another fragment, smaller, smoother, nestled among shards of broken clay and scattered bones. Its surface bore faint marks, curved lines etched with care and meaning lost to centuries. Your breath caught as a distant metallic chime echoed once more, a soft, urgent signal carried on the breath of the cavern. Your pulse quickened, every sense stretched taut like a wire, tuned to the slightest vibration. You knelt beside the fragment, brushing away loose dust with trembling fingers, the cool metal pocked and worn. The subtle markings seemed to shimmer faintly in the muted light, a secret language whispering beneath your touch. A sudden cold breeze drifted through the passage, stirring dust motes into a slow spiral that caught the flame's flicker. The air thickened with expectation, and the faint, almost imperceptible footsteps of someone, treading lightly on stone, echoed through the stillness. The sound faded into silence as quickly as it came, leaving your heart pounding in the hollow quiet. Rising slowly, the shard warm now against your palm, you strained your eyes down the narrowing tunnel. Walls seemed to lean inward, fingers of shadow curling just beyond reach. The flickering torch in your other hand cast long, wavering lines that danced like specters on rough stone, flickering with life in the stagnant gloom. You took a careful step forward, then another, each movement an intimate conversation between body and earth. Every scrape and scuff a whispered negotiation for your survival. Your bare toes scrabbled on gravel and jagged rock, sending tiny echoes scattering through the cavern. The scent of dry earth mingled with faint smoke, a delicate trace of fire's echo that lingered like a ghost. The cool dampness woven through the air pressed tight, pressing against your skin with the weight of secrets yet untold. At the tunnel's end, the space opened abruptly into a low chamber, the ceiling dipping close enough to brush your head. Here the air was heavier, cooler, tinged with the sharp, tangy scent of metal, and something older, something ancient and waiting. Pools of murky water reflected the faint torchlight, ripples spreading, slow and deliberate, when at the fragile illusion of stillness, you crouched beside one, your palms skimming the water's cold surface. The clammy touch sent a shiver down your spine, a brief shock of life in the deep quiet. Beneath the water, shapes emerged, long-forgotten carvings in the stone floor, worn smooth but unmistakably intricate. Looped lines and swirling patterns hinted at stories buried in time, woven into the very bones of the earth. Suddenly, a soft metallic clink echoed once more, nearer this time, sharper and more insistent. You turned slowly, eyes tracing the dark perimeter of the chamber. Somewhere in that shadow, barely glimpsed, movement flickered, a delicate, deliberate dance of absence and presence. Your breath caught, chest tightening with a cold mixture of fear and fierce curiosity. The cell walls seemed to contract inward, shadows drawing close like lurking predators. The shard pulsed in your hand, weight deepened with an ancient promise. You stepped forward, drawn as if by a thread woven from rust and whispered voices. Then, without warning, the flickering torchlight behind you wavered violently and snapped out. Darkness swallowed you whole with a slow, suffocating embrace, and in the shuddering black, your heart heard it, a faint, slow breath, deliberate and unnervingly close, as if the mine itself exhaled, waiting to reveal its next secret. A sudden darkness swallowed the flickering torchlight as it sputtered and died, plunging you into an enveloping blackness deeper than any you had known before. The cold pressed against your skin, a silent weight that seemed to throb with the distant pulse of the earth itself. Your breath hitched, caught in a shivering rhythm, each inhalation a rasping whisper swallowed by the void. The sharp scent of damp stone and faint smoke clung like a memory, weaving tightly around your senses and grounding you amidst the complete absence of sight. Your bare feet felt the uneven floor beneath them, cold and jagged, fingertips searching blindly as you reached out to steady yourself on the cold, wet wall. The rough texture was unforgiving, each tiny ridge and damp patch a reminder that this was no place for haste. Every movement was deliberate, a cautious negotiation with the crushing silence and the darkness that pressed with relentless intensity. The shard in your palm, cool and unyielding, throbbed faintly, a living anchor in this deep well of shadow. In the blackness, your ears stretched to catch any hint, a breath, a shuffle, a whisper more distinct than the others. The silence wasn't empty, it was full, pregnant with expectation, weighted with secrets. Your heartbeat hammered a slow, steady drum beneath your ribs, the only sound brave enough to fill the void. Somewhere close, the faintest scrape of metal on stone, repeated, patient, deliberate, a soft signal that threaded through the darkness like a fragile lifeline. Slowly, your hands found the worn handle of your pickaxe. The rough wood was solid beneath your fingers, a reassuring constant against the trembling of your body. You stepped forward tentatively, the cold floor giving way unevenly beneath your toes. The moisture was thick here, seeping through cracks and pooling in shallow hollows, each patch slick and treacherous underfoot. The air pressed heavy and stale, thick with the bitter tang of iron, mingled with the whisper of smoke that curled faintly like forgotten prayers. Ahead, a faint shimmer began to emerge, a pale, uncertain glimmer that caught and folded light from nowhere. The cavern breathed around it, the shadows twisting and quivering in slow, silent waves. The faint glow pulsed softly, a rhythmic heartbeat that matched the steady thrum of the shard against your skin. You crouched down, feeling the cold water ripple gently beneath your hand, the surface broken by a single, steady drip that echoed like a distant bell. Beneath the water, ancient carvings shone dimly, swirling, looping lines worn smooth but unmistakably deliberate. They whispered of times long faded, stories etched in stone before your name was ever spoken. Alongside the carvings, the ground held footprints, faint but unmistakably recent, pressing deep into the wet earth, a silent testament to footsteps that shared your cautious intrusion. Your fingers traced the cold edges of another shard half buried near the pool, the metal surface rough with rust, but alive with a subtle energy, humming faintly in the still air. The symbols carved upon it caught the flickering shadows, their lines mysterious but oddly familiar. They seemed to pulse with quiet urgency, a beckoning that stirred a mix of dread and fragile hope deep in your chest. Then a breath, slow, deliberate, impossibly close, brushed past your skin, cold as the deepest shadows. You stiffened, senses alert and coiled, every nerve stretched taut like the silence that now crackled around you. The faint clink of metal sounded again, sharper, ringing clear in the tight space, drawing your attention toward a narrow fissure winding deeper into the earth. The shard warmed as you pocketed it, the pulse steady beneath your palm, like a quiet heartbeat guiding your steps. You rose slowly, muscles aching with exhaustion and tension, and turned toward the dark passage. The rough walls seemed to narrow, pressing inward with a cold determination, while the stale air whispered of secrets long buried beneath unyielding stone. Your bare feet whispered softly over scattered rubble as you moved forward. A chill clung to your skin, prickling at your neck and wrists in soft, icy fingers. The scent of dry herbs lingered, faint, acrid, like smoke from a fire reduced to embers. The torchlight flickered uncertainly in your grip, shadows dancing in time with your quickening pulse. At the tunnel's end, the space opened again, low and wide, with the damp dripping steadily from cracks above, punctuating the heavy silence like a slow measured countdown. Pools of murky water reflected the flickering flames, their surfaces broken by occasional ripples from unseen drips. Your gaze caught the flicker of movement at the dark edge, an absence of light that moved with intent, as if something watched, patient and unreadable. You stepped cautiously toward the motion, muscles tense, heart steady but pounding, the shard's quiet glow pulsing a strange rhythm in your pocket. The cold dampness clung tightly now, wrapping a clammy weight around your limbs, a palpable presence weaving through the stillness, silent, watching. Suddenly, the torchlight flickered violently, casting the chamber into sharp contrasts of light and dark. Shadows leapt and twisted, contorting into shapes just beyond comprehension. You stumbled back, the rocky floor scraping raw against your skin, toes clutching desperately for balance. The sudden gust of cooler air swept through, carrying with it a fresh scent, sharp, metallic, and faintly sweet, like blood mingled with dry herbs, a warning woven in the breath of the mine. The clink of metal echoed again, closer now, sharper, a whispered call threading through the heavy air. Somewhere just beyond the reach of your light, something stirred, a slow, deliberate motion, your breath caught in the stale silence, heart pounding the heavy rhythm of survival. You held the shard tightly as a sudden, low breath brushed the air beside you, so close it might have been your own shadow exhaling. The darkness deepened, swallowing the faint glow entirely, and in that final, suffocating instant, the weight of the mine pressed inward, carrying a promise long buried beneath stone and rust, that the true secret waited here, just beyond sight, patiently watching and ready to awaken. The breath that brushed past your skin was no longer a threat, but a quiet invitation. The mine itself exhaling its long-held secret into the dim cavern. You stepped deeper into the narrowing tunnel, each measured footfall sinking with the steady pulse of the shard nestled in your palm. The heavy silence filled every space, yet it no longer pressed down with ominous weight. Instead, it held the gentle promise of an ending, of a story whispered into the earth and now unfolding before you. Ahead, the faint glow swelled into a soft luminescence, revealing a chamber suffused with ancient light. The walls, slick with time and moisture, bore faint carvings that spiraled like echoed whispers, patterns that seemed to pulse faintly in harmony with your own heartbeat. Here, deep beneath the unyielding stone and endless toil, something far older than the mine itself awaited in patient stillness. You moved slowly, fingers tracing the cool stone beside faded inscriptions, feeling the intangible thread that wove you to all those who had come before, captives Laborers, souls, caught in the relentless pursuit of unreachable gold. But this place was no longer just prison and punishment. It was a threshold, a forgotten crossroads between despair and something unnamed, something beyond the slow grind of days and the harsh scrape of stone. The shard in your hand pulsed steadily, a quiet rhythm that grew stronger as you approached a low stone altar, cradling a shallow pool of crystalline water. The surface caught your flickering torchlight like liquid glass, smooth and reflective against the rough hardness surrounding it. Your bare knees pressed lightly into the cold earth, and you bent to touch the water, feeling a cool clarity seep into your skin, washing away the layer of dust and sweat that marked your time here. As your eyes adjusted, visions seemed to shimmer beneath the water's glass, a tapestry of faces, places, moments locked in memory. You saw the steady hands of the overseer soften, the broken bodies of your companions eased into stillness, the first faint threads of hope weaving a fragile tapestry through the murk of suffering. A dream, nor a trick of firelight. It was the pulse of history itself, made real in this sacred breath held beneath the earth. You rose slowly, the weight of that knowledge settling with a gentle gravity. The mind's harsh air no longer clawed at your lungs. Instead, it felt like a quiet embrace, as if the stone walls themselves exhaled in relief. Beyond this chamber waited the twisting tunnels you had known so long, but something fundamental had shifted in their shadowed depths. The endless toil could not be undone, but now you carried within you the light of understanding, the soft ember of endurance kindled through the years of hardship. Behind you, the faint murmur of the distant prisoners stirred, a chorus no longer hollow, but threaded with something fragile and human. Breaths pulled steady and slow, the rhythm of lives weathered but unbroken. The overseer's silhouette flickered at the cavern's edge, no longer a figure of menace, but a shadow drawn thin by time and the weight of an impossibly long sentence. You wondered, briefly, if he too felt the quiet unraveling of despair, a release wrapped in stillness. You took a final breath, the air cool and still inside the vast cavern. The worn shard, now a steady pulse, tucked close to your skin, a talisman of the journey past. The flickering torch balanced in your other hand reminded you of the fragile light that had carried you through darkness, its flame small but unyielding, casting dancing shadows that stretched toward the cavern's heart. In this long, deep silence, with the chill of stone pressed lightly against your skin, and the shard's quiet heartbeat beating slow and sure, you felt the mine exhale once more. The weight of suffering balanced by the light of resilience. The dark folded gently into dawn, and as you turned, bare feet tracing thoughtful steps back toward the tunnel's entrance, the first soft breaths of dawn had begun to reach the distant horizon. The desert sun, still distant but certain, promised warmth beyond the heavy stones and the aching solitude. In that quiet moment, you carried not just the memory of toil, but the fragile seed of peace, woven into the marrow of your bones, waiting patiently to grow. The mine's secret was no longer a burden. It was a story told at last, whispered between breaths, resting now in the soft cradle of the earth's embrace. And as your footsteps echoed faintly on the stone floor, fading slowly into the light, the world, vast, ancient, and endlessly patient, held you gently in its quiet, eternal arms.